So I'll repeat. This is Boxcar Bertha from 1972. It's the debut movie by Martin Scorsese, based on a book written by Ben Reitman. Screenplay is by Joyce Hooper Carrington and John William Carrington, and the two lead characters are Barbara Hershey, who plays Boxcar Bertha, and David Carradine, who plays Big Bill Shelley. A Woman Under the Influence, 1972, or is it 1974, sorry. It's directed by John Cassavetes. He's also responsible for the screenplay. It stars Peter Falk as Nick Longhetti. Gina Rowlands is his wife, I assume, Mabel Longhetti. And there's quite a number of Cassavetes playing here. I don't know whether they're sisters or whatever. But the plot. So, a woman whose influences only gradually reveal themselves, give us insights into one specific woman and the problems of surviving in a society where very few people are fully liberated. The woman is Mabel, played by Rowland's wife and mother. Her husband Nick is the head of a construction gang, and often he's quite gregarious. He's likely to bring the whole crew home at 7 a.m. for a spaghetti dinner. Mabel is the opposite. She tries hard, too hard, but that's her problem. She desperately wants to please her husband, and when they're alone, she does. They get along and they do love one another. But other people, she gets a little wacky. The mannerisms, the strange personal little ways she has of expressing herself get out of scale. She's not sure how to act because she's not sure who she is. The film takes place before and after 6 months she spends in a mental institution, and her husband has her committed reluctantly after she begins to crack up. There's been some indications that she's in trouble. She behaves strangely when some neighbour children are brought over to stay for a while with her own, and the neighbour is afraid to leave his kids because of the way she's acting. But what is strange, she's insecure, hyper, manic. She laughs too much and pushes too hard. She's not good with other people around. Her husband does what he thinks he has to do and commits her, but what about him? What kind of guy is he? A Woman Under the Influence gets to be terribly complicated, involved and fascinating. If Mabel is disturbed, then so is he. He's as crazy as she is, maybe more so, because he's a man and he has channels for his craziness. He stays at home and she gets sent away. Nick, played by Falk, shouts and storms, and he was always on. Mabel, by Rowlands, played by Rowlands, who won an Oscar nomination, seems so touchingly vulnerable to every kind of influence around her that we don't want to tap her because she might fall apart. Because their personalities are so open, so visible, we see that what might be hidden in a quieter, tidier film that Nick no less has than Mabel is trapped. Right, my first look at Oppemheimer, the big movie this year, directed and written for the screen by Christopher Nolan, and there will be a slide based on a book by Kay Bird and Martin Sherwin, and the cast, I won't go through it all, But the notables, in the lead role is Cillian Murphy, who plays Robert Oppenheimer. Emily Blunt is his wife, Kitty. Robert Downey Jr. plays Louis Strauss. This is a member of the team of scientists that were involved in the creation and the launching of the atomic bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945. Other notables that caught my eye: Jason Clarke. I remember him from a very good series a while back. Roger Robe is his character. Kenneth Branagh plays Niels Bohr. What others? Tom Conte, I haven't seen him. He's Albert Einstein in this. And Joss Hartnett is Ernest Lawrence. Florence Pugh, very strong actress. She plays Jean Tatlock. And whipping through the cast, Matt Damon. Let's see, what's his character? He plays Leslie Groves. And Freddie Mercury's Rami Malek turns it up as David Hill. And I think the last one, Harry Truman, is played by Gary Oldman. First impressions then of Oppenheimer. Sorry, but I'm being a bit critical here, but I was expecting some entertainment for the first half hour. It seemed so clinical and without sort of any sort of sense of emotional impact, that it was like sitting inside a science lesson when you're thoroughly bored with the lecturer. And although we were being introduced to the members of the team under Oppenheimer and the procedural aspects of how it evolved, I found it minimally of interest. The cinematography was worth noting, particularly expansive shots of the desert areas. The film then, in the second half hour, started to grab me, and it involved really the relationships between Oppenheimer, his wife, and his lover, and there was something sort of real about this aspect, and we got a sort of insight really into the fact that this man was desperately in need of being wanted for the fact that he was a man with feelings and emotions rather than just a brain that they all wanted to grab a piece of. And I highlight one particular scene that I did enjoy, was the introduction of Major Leslie Groves, played by Matt Damon, who was a sort of a military major, obviously, who was the link between the government and the scientists, and his discussion with Oppenheimer brought out the importance of the politics at the time, the fact that they were absolutely frantic that the Germans were going to enable the creation of a bomb before the Americans, and also little snippets about took place in the conversation where it became evidence that the Russians weren't included in any discussions about development. They were sort of ostracized. And of course, running alongside this was the fact that the government were very suspicious of Oppenheimer's possible leanings towards being a communist sympathizer, in view of the fact that his wife was a Communist Party member when they met. But it still is a bit diminished with regard to what I would call entertainment, which I sincerely believe a movie should actually be doing. I think the vast majority of the public who go to see this film will probably walk out and say, well, that was as dull as it comes. And the complexity of the relationships are such that it would be above most people's heads. It's probably a great movie for critics, but not a great movie for the public. In listening to some of the dialogue with Oppenheimer and his team with regard to the atomic race, so to say, for a bomb, it becomes evident that the Russians are also testing, that they're about to start testing. They're worried that there may well be testing going on in Germany, and they're all sort of guessing as to what will happen if they were to drop the bomb. It's like sort of the human race being part of a dice game. Nolan's using the sort of second hour to present to the viewer this notion that there was a belief by Oppenheimer that by using an atomic weapon would actually bring countries of the world together, and that they would agree the notion that atomic weapons would not be in anybody's interest to pursue, and that peace within the world would exist because of that common ground of the notion of the destruction of the weapon. Of course, in hindsight, it's clear that it just propagated more and more countries wanting to have that weapon, rather than no countries having no weapon. And clearly, the world is now more dangerous than it was at the time that the first bomb was dropped on Hiroshima. Following the successful test at Los Alamos of the nuclear bomb, Oppenheimer sort of pushed to the side a little bit by the military brass as they make plans for the dropping of the first bomb on Hiroshima. We then have a press conference after the first bomb is dropped, and Oppenheimer, it's not a press conference, but it's a statement he's making to the staff, all those involved with the project, and the elation and tremendous euphoria of happiness is conveyed by Nolan in his direction, and one can see that Oppenheimer is forcing the words out of his mouth to his troops, so to speak, and he's concerned as to what he's let loose on the world, and the words that he uses to fuel this euphoria sent a chill really down one's spine when listening to it. This idea of we've taught them a lesson, and unfortunately these sort of feelings and mass hysteria seem all too relevant today with what's going on in the Middle East. And one asks the question really, why are humans as a race so charged up by murder? Why are they able to exhibit such powerful positive responses to the fact that large quantities of their fellow human beings have been wiped out? It's a very chilling reminder of how fragile our lives are, surrounded by each other. Possibly the most poignant scene in the movie is when Oppenheimer is invited to the White House to sit with Truman, played by Oldman, and the scene is vile and chilling as Oppenheimer shares his doubt and concern about the fact that there is a rapid need to involve the Soviets in nuclear disarmament and to have an agreement. Whereas in contrast, Truman's reveling in the superiority that the Americans have now attained, and is convinced that the Russians will never get the technology to secure their own nuclear weapon. And of course we all know that that was complete garbage. But again, this sort of American sort of conceited arrogance comes through perfectly as the president takes the glory, as he sees it, for the end of the war rather than the creator of the device. And when Oppenheimer declares that he feels he's got blood on his hands, as he leaves, Truman makes the comment, "Don't let that crybaby come here again." It is fiction, of course, but how near is it to the truth? After the war, the politicians rally round to get rid of Oppenheimer and regurgitate the earlier allegations that were false of him being a communist. And members of the political class do U-turns as their friend becomes basically too high risk. And Oppenheimer is viewed as almost a traitor and a spy for allowing a Russian agent to work at Alamos, as a member of the British contingent is found to be a double agent. Final thoughts on Oppenheimer. overall, nearly a 3-hour watch. It was far too long, but eventually most of the vital parts of the story were told, about how America and the political and military establishments took the opportunity to try and establish itself as the power around the world when it comes to military might. Oppenheimer, whose intentions initially in expanding science with his mathematical abilities, was eventually used as a pawn in the establishment's drive to assert its superiority over the Soviet Union. And some of the ways that they went about trying to destroy Oppenheimer's reputation after the war are typical of how the establishment deal with so-called heroes. Of course, the scenario regarding the dropping of the bomb and whether it was necessary to bring an end to the conflict with Japan. That debate will continue. My personal view was that the Japanese were on their knees and were a mere few months away from surrender, and they basically were just asking that they retain their emperor as a part of a deal to surrender to the Americans in the Pacific. But Truman and his military generals as such were unwilling to compromise, and they felt that they needed to teach the Japanese a lesson, and a very, very expensive lesson in terms of loss of life. And this weapon was absolutely a genocidal delivery, and God forbid, although I don't believe in God, well, one hopes that it's never unleashed on the population again in the future.